Okay, carrying on from where we left off. Okay, so for Britain, they agreed that China was a place of interest together with Japan. Okay, and now see, chronologically, this doesn't flow. So, now if I were to rewrite the textbook, I will place this before the conflict with Russia, so that you know that they actually had control of Korea, right? So as you can see, the when we talk about conflict with Russia, they saw this as a security threat to their interests in Korea. And why did they have Korea in the first place was because of the first Sino-Japanese War. Now, every time you see the word Sino, it's got to do with China. Okay, so it broke out in 1894, and as a result of the war, which we can say that Japan won, but winning doesn't mean to say you get to take the whole country. Yeah. So they signed this treaty of Shimonoseki, in which China had to give up the control of Korea and also the island of Taiwan to Japan. So Taiwan was actually a first Japanese overseas colony, and Korea, they tried to rule them indirectly first, and after that they decided that ruling indirectly is too much of a trouble, so they decided to annex them, that means to say conquer them completely and to rule them directly. Again, the core history students would know what is an indirect rule when you look at Malaya, as well as how the British tried to rule them indirectly through the use of residents. So in this case, when we say ruling indirectly in Korea, it would be something like keeping the emperor in Korea, and then after that saying that the emperor is still the person that the Koreans should be looking to, but actually the emperor have to report to the Japanese, something like that. Okay, direct rule would be like removing the emperor directly, the Korean emperor directly, and then putting in the Japanese emperor. That would be a direct rule versus indirect rule. Okay, now soon after that, since they were keen to expand further into China despite their victory, in which they actually got Taiwan and Korea already, a lot of other Western countries were very interested in China because of its large territory, population, and potential for trade. Like how I think there was one time in which I think it's the Nike, the founder of Nike, he mentioned something like there are 1 billion people in China, and that means to say that I can sell 1 billion pairs of shoes. And that even applies to today. China's a big market. Whenever we say the word market, it means to say it's a potential for us to sell things too, right? Like how Singapore's market is very small. Like if you want to sell bubble tea, you can potentially only sell to 5 million people. If they buy one cup from you can sell 5 million cups a day. I know it seems like a lot already, but if you go to China, you can sell 1 billion. So that is a huge difference. Okay, so Japan already had control of Manchuria, and they also have Korea and Taiwan. So again, chronologically, this is going to fall in after the Russo-Japanese War. Okay, and at the time of the 21 demands, there was instability in China. So if you know a little bit about China history, it was the fall of the Qing dynasty. That means to say it was the last emperor, and there was a power struggle for the communists, I think. Is it? No, Yuan Shikai and Sun Yat-sen. I always mix up the two. I can't remember who's who. One of them is regarded as the founding father of Taiwan. Really can't remember who. Go and search it out if you're interested. So during World War One, the Japanese fought alongside the Allies, so they considered the good guys. So the Japanese were the good guys in World War One. Okay, and they occupied the Qingdao, which was German controlled, in Shandong. All these places are all in China. Okay, so remember, for China, it was never colonized, but the Angmos, they have some kind of influence there. So the Germans, they have influence in Qingdao and Shandong. And so Japan then delivered 21 demands after World War One to China because they wanted China to recognize Japanese interest in China. Okay, sorry, before we get to that. So this is something like one of these days, out of nowhere, and suka we go to Malaysia and then we say that, look, Johor is very close to us. We want control of Johor. Do you think Malaysia will just give it to us? No, right? It doesn't make sense. But if the country is unstable, okay, they might not really have a right to say at all. Okay, if the country is weak and there isn't really an authority there like China was, okay, that is why Japan was able to deliver the 21 demands to China to recognize the Japanese interest in China. Okay, now what you're seeing now on the screen is extracted from Wikipedia directly. So just go and Google 21 demands, you will be able to see this. You can see this in the textbook as well, but I think this is much clearer, where it gives you a summary of the 21 demands grouped into 5 groups. Okay, I'm trying to fit everything to the screen here, but I'm very lazy to go and resize everything. It's technically very troublesome, okay? Go and Google on your own if you want to find out what it is. But otherwise, as you can see, it's basically just Japan demanding for stuff. Okay, and they demand for recognition here, and they demand for the Manchuria. Okay, demand for Manchuria and the railway zone. So expanding Japan's sphere of influence in Manchuria and Inner Mongolia. Of this place in China, giving away any more coastal island concessions to foreign powers. Group 5 is supposedly the most aggressive. Okay, you shall go and read on about what it is about. So what happened was that eventually through negotiations, they watered down the demands to be like 13 demands instead of 21, and China accepted them, okay? Because they know that if they reject them, it would be war. This would be pretty similar to the Munich Agreement, okay? Give in, appeasement, basically, because the other option is war, okay? Now, again, keep in mind, we are still on the first factor, and we are talking about how did all these contribute to Japan's ambition? Okay, Japan's ambition. Okay, so we're only at the third point about the conflicts with China. So now we look at the worsening relations with USA and American racism against the Japanese. Now, the Americans were really racist because at a period of time in history, they think that the whites are the supreme know-it-all. And at the time of the recording of this video, the esteemed Donald Trump also, I guess, in an indirect way, is saying the same thing as well, believing in white supremacy. So basically, he's racist. You can say that. Oh man, I'm publishing this on YouTube, but nobody will listen to this, so he won't come and sue me. Right, so worsening relations with USA. There were a lot of immigration of Japanese and Chinese and Koreans to actually America and competing with the Americans for jobs. So it sounds familiar, right? Like Singapore's foreign talents, and how Singaporeans sometimes like to complain that there are too many, foreign talents coming in. That was, I think, a few years ago when we had complaints about this. Yeah, that is a negative. I'm not encouraging you to do so. I'm trying to show you what happens, when you have racism against a certain race, that war is going to happen. Okay, that's a long stretch. Okay, but anyway, let's come back to here. So there were laws passed to basically actively be racist against the Japanese. There was a Chinese Exclusion Act that suspended Chinese immigration, Japanese and Korean Exclusion Act in 1905, and the Japanese were greatly offended. Basically, in 1905, they just defeated an Angmo country. The Japanese mentality would be like, why? You scared of me? Why do you need to exclude me? Okay? Second of all, there was a worsening relations with the USA at the Paris Peace Conference. So if you remember, Paris Peace Conference happened after World War I, where they were discussing what to do, and the Japanese demanded for racial equality. But this was rejected, and no unanimous agreement was ever reached, and the Japanese did not feel respected at all. Now, the Japanese treated the Paris Peace Conference with great importance, and they sent this delegation to Paris Peace Conference, which is a huge delegation. Okay, in comparison, the Australian and New Zealand was a delegation of like 5 people, which was quite pathetic. Another example of worsening relations with the USA was at the Washington Naval Conference. This was already mentioned in chapter 4, was it? I think 4.1, failure of the League of Nations to exercise disarmaments. This was one of the few successes, not by the League of Nations. Was it actually? Go find out if you can't remember. Okay, so eventually it was a success in which they reduced their naval forces in the ratio 5:5:3 for USA, Britain, and Japan. If you can't remember Italy and France, I think the easier one would just be to remember this, just this three. 5:5:3. So if USA have 5,000 ships, Japan can only have 3,000. Okay, so Japan had reduced their naval strength more than USA and Japan, and they felt that it was very unfair because, well, I'm a major power now. I fought on the winning side. I'm the good guy. I defeated an Angmo country. How come you're not letting me be as equal as you are? Basically, their pride was affected. Okay, and as some of you may know, pride can be a very dangerous thing. Right now, if you were listening in my class, you would be treated at this point in time to a story about this Japanese migrant to America who became a war hero of sorts and became a senator for Japan. But since you were not listening, I'm not going to go through it here. Right, this is for N level. So if you're an N level student and if you're listening to this, this will be an example of a question that you can look at, but I'm going to skip past this. Okay, second factor, okay, would be on the crisis in Japan. Let me run through this. No, should I run through this quickly? Yeah, okay, let me run through this very quickly in 3.5 minutes. Now, if you can see the economic crisis and the overpopulation, actually it will sort of overlap. When I go into it, you will see that it actually does overlap to some extent. And actually, on second thought, I think I'll pause the video here and you can take a break and move on to the next parts for the crisis in Japan, okay?